Hey there, welcome to Witchy Wednesday. It's Lara here, and this is your weekly astrology forecast for November 27th to December 2nd, 2019. We're entering the last month of this crazy year. Um, and we're heading into some big energy, right, in Capricorn. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But before I do that, I want to remind you that we are still riding the waves of the new moon in Sagittarius that happened only yesterday. So it's a really good time still to connect with that energy, to set your new moon intentions, to think about the Sagittarian themes, which I went into detail about yesterday. No, not yesterday, last week, in last week's Witchy Wednesday video. So you can go watch that. It's still very relevant. I also have been talking about it on Facebook and a little bit on Instagram too. So the links to those are below if you're wanting to, get more regular kind of updates and keep in the loop about what's going on. Yesterday, I also posted a link to an article in Elite Daily, and I consulted on this article a few weeks ago, about a month ago or so. They asked me to do that, and the article is about moon sign compatibility. So I'm mentioned in there and a couple of other astrologers as well. So if you're interested, I'll put the link to that article below as well. And on the subject of the moon, we have the moon still in the fire sign of Sagittarius as I'm recording this today on Wednesday. And then it enters Capricorn tomorrow, Aquarius on Sunday, and Pisces on Tuesday. So if you're wanting to, better be able to connect with the moon as she moves through the sky and understand more about her role in our lives, because it's a significant one, then I really encourage you to go download the guide that I made for you. It's a free guide. It's a guide to working with the moon, and it's an MP3 and a PDF. So you can get that at the link below. You just have to go over to my website, put in your email address, and you'll get it as an automatic download. Okay. So I hope you take advantage of that. But as I was saying, the moon is, as of next Tuesday, right before I do the next recording, will be in Pisces. And speaking of Pisces, we have Neptune, the ruler of Pisces, that just stationed direct this morning. 7:32 a.m. to be exact, Eastern Standard Time this morning. Really interesting from my perspective over here where I am, because we have a pretty significant winter storm happening that actually started to really gain momentum right about then as Neptune stationed direct. I woke up this morning, 6 o'clock or so, had a look outside, thought, oh, it's not going to be a snow day. There's hardly any snow on the ground. And the buses were canceled anyways in anticipation. And then right around, 7 o'clock, 7:30, as Neptune stationed direct, boom. It was like Neptune woke up and smashed his trident on the ground, right? And we just had this storm blow up. So I have 2 kids home from school today, and a sick husband, and 3 cats that are being a little irritating. So you may hear some background noise in this video today. Hopefully not. I'm up here in my office, but sometimes the sound travels. So let's talk a little bit about Neptune before we get into some other things. The focus for later on in the video is going to be about Jupiter moving into Capricorn, because that's happening on Monday, and that's a longer term transit, right? So I'm going to speak to that in a little more detail and where that's going to be for you, for each of you. And I talked about that. I wrote a post on Facebook this morning about that, and I think it may be helpful to some of you to check that out. So if you want to, again, links below. But let's talk a little bit more about Neptune. So Neptune retrograded on June 21st, which was the summer solstice, and this is not an irregular thing, because Neptune retrogrades every year for about 150, 160 days out of every year. So not so unusual. It's part of our normal yearly cycle. What differs, though, are the conversations that Neptune has with other planets, right? While it's retrograding and transiting the sky, the conversations other planets are having during that time, and the house that Neptune is sitting in, right, for each of us. So, but the thing about that is it's a very slow moving process because Neptune moves really, really slowly. It takes about 12 or 13 years to transit one sign. So it stays in a particular sign for that amount of time. So, but that's part of the larger cycle, right? It will change signs and therefore houses in our chart every 12 or 13 years. But right now it's in Pisces and it will be there until 2025. It's been there since February 3rd, 2012. So you can kind of look back and think about that time and when Neptune shifted into Pisces and, maybe what themes started playing out in your life at that time. So it's there until 2025, March 30th, 2025 to be exact. So for a while yet, right? The last time Neptune retrograded was June 18th till November 24th, 2018. Okay, so that's the last time it was retrograde. So you can think about, what was that period like for you, specifically in relation to Neptunian themes, right? Which are things like spirituality, the subconscious, our dreams, empathy, compassion, our view of reality, right? Neptune is this very hard to pin down ethereal energy. It's a big ball of gas, right? It's so it's like this veil over reality, kind of foggy and dreamy, right? It has to do with illusion, delusion. It can have to do with our self-sabotaging behaviors and bad habits, right, on the shadow side. It speaks to our mental and spiritual health, how we spend time in solitude, in relaxation, rest, recovery, dreaminess. Neptune is at home in the 12th house, which, among other things, has to do with institutions, places that are kind of closed off from the world, right? So you can think about, did some kind of institution like that play a role for you when Neptune retrograded last time? Like a spiritual retreat, for example, spiritual retreat centers, hospitals, hospices, prisons, rehab facilities, youth detention facilities, mental health facilities, these kinds of things. So, I mean, that's not going to be for everybody, right? But it's a potential. And some other Neptunian themes, like I mentioned compassion. This can be humanitarian related, sort of humanitarian causes. It can have to do with the acting world even. Neptune is related to that. So with something going on for you in one of those areas, and speaking to one of those themes. Neptune lacks boundaries, right? Neptune, ruler of Pisces, lacks boundaries. Pisces has a difficult time sometimes knowing where they end and the outside world begins, or another begins, kind of thing. So there is some trouble with boundaries. It's a very porous, absorbent energy, right? Which is why it's related to, psychic abilities, kind of thing, and intuition. Getting messages from the unseen world, like messages that come through in sort of more ethereal ways, right? Via our dreams, via some kind of, you know, sort of psychic experience or that kind of thing, right? Neptune energy, sorry, I just have to unplug something here, is the energy of the dreamer, the artist. I don't know why it's being so difficult. There. The one who envisions a perfect, peaceful world, right? And it can cause us to sort of look at the world through rose-colored glasses. And, Pisces is often associated with viewing the world through rose-colored glasses. You've heard me say this before. I'm a Pisces sun, so I get it, right? And Neptune happens to be moving back and forth over my sun. This is like a once-in-a-lifetime transit that most people will never experience in their lives. And there's actually threads on the internet speaking to this experience by those of us who are going through it or have gone through it, because it is it's something, let me tell you. Anyway, what I was saying is that it can be there can be this tendency to view the world through rose-colored glasses, because it's quite painful to see the true reality, right? And being so compassionate and empathic and porous, feeling all the feels, other people's feelings as well as your own, can be really, really difficult. And so sometimes this energy can cause us to escape reality, right? In some way, shape, or form. But the other thing I want to say about Neptune, actually, before I get there, is it's a generational planet, right? So meaning it, because it moves so slowly and it stays in one place for so long, it has an impact on generations. And so everyone alive in this sort of Neptune and Pisces generation, right, are charged with breaking some old patterns, some habits, some illusions that have impacted the generation as a whole. And if you think about it, during the age of Neptune and Pisces, spirituality, a very Neptunian thing, has exploded, right? There's been a focus on regaining our humanity, although we may not see concrete evidence of this in the outside world, depending on where we're looking and what we're tuned into. But it is definitely happening, right? There are many of us that are focused there, and there's been this emphasis on reconnecting to spirit, right? Because we've lost that connection over time. We've been cut off from spirit for so long. So Neptune direct will allow us to gain more clarity. And the outward manifestation of what's been brewing internally for us in regards to those Neptunian themes, right? So our spiritual work, our inspiration, our vision for the world are all things that we can feel kind of like the veil lifting. You may notice, particularly if you're somebody that's, Neptune has a big influence on, if it's a major factor in your chart, you might notice these few days you're feeling a bit spacey, a bit foggy, a bit confused. It's kind of like a bear waking up from hibernation, and being a little bit disoriented and kind of like, what's going on, I've been feeling like that the last couple of days. So it may be impacting you that way too. But gradually that fog will lift, right? And so I think that's enough about Neptune. Look to the house in your chart that contains Pisces, and you will get a sense of how, where this energy is playing out for you. The other thing I want to spend time talking about is Jupiter entering Capricorn. That is happening on Monday, December 2nd. At 1:20 p.m. Eastern Standard. And Jupiter will remain in Capricorn until December 19th, 2020. So Jupiter stays in a sign for approximately a year at a time. It will conjunct Saturn on December 21st, 2020. So after Saturn meets up with Pluto, right, Jupiter and Saturn are also going to meet up. And I've touched on this briefly before. I'll talk about it in future videos because we're a ways off from that happening yet. But it's called, when Jupiter and Saturn meet up in the sky, it's known as the Great Conjunction. And historically, it's linked to the rise and fall of leaders. So, more on that in future videos, but just to kind of tune you into that. Jupiter is leaving its home sign of Sagittarius. It's entering Capricorn, right, on the 2nd. So this has been kind of a weird transit, perhaps not as uplifting as some astrologers have, may have led us to believe. But what we ultimately need to remember is that Jupiter is there to grow things, right? Jupiter is connected to the concepts of growth, abundance, expansion, seeking adventure, the search for meaning and truth. And again, I wrote about that on Facebook earlier today, right? So if you want to check out that post, you're welcome to. But if you think about it in that way, there is no doubt that some of that has been playing out for each of us, right? And in least one area of our lives, if we really settle into that and think about it. In the area of our chart that Sagittarius occupies specifically, that's where Jupiter has been transiting for this last year. So there has been on some level an expansion of our spiritual beliefs, our values, our learning, education, our worldview, perhaps travel, our search for meaning and truth, right? These are all Jupiter Sagittarian themes. The traditional mode of thinking is that Jupiter doesn't love being in Capricorn. It's considered in its fall in Capricorn because, that sort of jovial, youthful, optimistic, enthusiastic energy of Jupiter gets a bit of a reality check in Capricorn. And so it doesn't necessarily love that, right? Because Capricorn is about responsibility, maturity, mastery. It's about going after our ambitions and building success. And so, Capricorn wants us to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps, right? To put our nose to the grindstone kind of thing. And Jupiter doesn't really like that harshness. It doesn't like those rules and boundaries. Capricorn wants us to plan. Jupiter wants us to follow our impulses. So you see how this is not necessarily a match made in heaven. But here's the good news. The thing about this, sorry, my throat's still irritated here, is that it's a really brilliant opportunity to grow something very, very solid and sustainable while Jupiter's in Capricorn. To be mature and responsible, about our morals, our truth, our the direction that we're headed. So some questions to think about over this time. What adventure do we want to go on moving forward? What do we truly know in our hearts, right? What truth are we willing to admit and speak? Like, what maybe truth have we been just holding on to? Good, bad, or otherwise, right? And that it's time to release out into the world. How can we sculpt our sort of bigger picture vision, that's Jupiter, into our reality, right? Capricorn. What will it take for us to gain a sense of material, Capricorn, well-being, Jupiter, in our lives? So these are some things for you to consider. It's a time to take the wisdom and the truth that we've gained through Jupiter moving through Sagittarius and apply it to our reality now, Jupiter in Capricorn. right? We can grow something, as I mentioned, really beautiful and solid with deep, strong roots and hardy, fruitful branches. Like it gives me the image of a tree, right? That has roots growing deep into the earth and growing Jupiter um, healthy and strong and grounded kind of thing. So I think ultimately this transit of Jupiter through Capricorn, if we are willing to kind of do the work, by the end of it, it's about the high we get, right? Jupiter from reaping the rewards of our hard work, of our of like executing our vision. And of if you think about the image of or the symbol of Capricorn, right? The goat, the sea goat, um, just kind of slowly but surely climbing that mountain against all odds and reaching the precipice. And then we get to look out onto, this from that high vantage point, which is Jupiter, right? Jupiter is said to bring good luck, good fortune. But I think this depends on a couple of things. A, it depends on our perception because, as I've said before, some blessings come in disguise, right? So we have to be willing to recognize them. It's up to us to recognize them. And then the other thing is, how do we use this energy? It's always about how we use the energy, right? We have free will. So, although there's something to be said for luck, mostly it doesn't just drop out of the sky. On occasion, that can happen, but that's not most people's experience. So, we make our own luck in many ways. And Jupiter in Capricorn is a perfect time and the perfect opportunity for us to be able to do that. So, how do we do that when Jupiter's in Capricorn? By being organized, by being prepared and mature and responsible, by becoming the master of our craft, right? By working with those folks that are at the top of their game, Capricorn, by recognizing our own authority, Capricorn, by working towards our goals, Jupiter, and Capricorn to a degree, but there's a different flavor there. Doing that in a mature way with integrity, with our morals intact, by learning to be self-sufficient without being overly kind of protective of what's ours, right? Because that can be the shadow side of Capricorn. So, and in that vein, what we need to be mindful of, I think, during this transit is that Jupiter expands wherever it goes. So we don't want it to expand the shadow side, right, of Capricorn energy, which can be authoritarianism, which can be over focus on the material, materialism and status. It can be extreme conservatism, power tripping, this kind of thing. So that's not what we want to grow ultimately. Capricorn wants us to streamline, right? Where Jupiter just wants it all. And so we're going to need to evaluate what we want to grow, right? Where do we need to put our focus? What do we want to grow and expand, while considering what areas we need to trim the fat. Those areas that are not ultimately serving us, kind of thing. So ultimately, Jupiter wants us to help us gain perspective. It wants to expand our joy wherever it goes. And that requires us to be committed to our truth. I think of the saying, the whole time I was kind of contemplating this energy, the truth will set us free, right? That's really apropos in this scenario. In Capricorn, Jupiter wants to help us pursue our personal goals, our truth, but it wants us to do that joyfully. And so when we're doing work that we love, right? And when we're operating from a place of our true nature and our authentic selves, it doesn't feel like work. It feels like our true calling. It feels like a vocation rather than a job. And so when we're aligned with our truth, Jupiter, no matter what's happening around us in this crazy world, we are on solid ground, Capricorn. So with that in mind, I'm going to speak to Jupiter and Capricorn through the signs. So keep in mind that this is a long-term transit over the next year, December to December. And, you know, I'll speak really sort of briefly to the house that this is moving into for you and where you can expect these themes to play out. And you will have a greater sense of the specifics in your own life because I'm not sitting there looking at your own personal chart and having a conversation with you. So this is a general kind of overview, right? Based on rising sign first and foremost, but also sun and moon sign are relevant. So please listen to all three if you have the time, but definitely listen to the intro. And I would say to all of you that, like, I know it's nature, like, what does this mean for me, right? I just want to jump to my sign and I want to just hear your little blurb. But that's not going to give you a complete picture. So if you have time to only listen to part of this video, I would always say listen to the introduction, because that's going to really give you more depth. But we do like to know where this is playing out for each of us. So let's talk about that now briefly. So we're going to start with Capricorn because Capricorn, this is happening in your sign. So much is happening in your sign. Oh, wait a second. I forgot to show you the chart. Here's the chart. Speaking of what's going on in Capricorn. So here's the chart. Just briefly, I drew this up for today so we can see where Neptune has already stationed direct. We don't have the R there anymore. So Neptune has stationed direct right around the 15, 16 degree mark of Pisces. And then we have, look at, right? Oh my gosh, Capricorn, Pluto, Saturn, South Node, Ceres, Venus is now in there. Jupiter is about to move in there. Then, well, obviously the moon, because she moves so quickly, will move through once a month. And then the sun eventually later in the month will join all the other planets in Capricorn. So, wow, moving towards some big Capricorn energy. That's all I'll show you for today. So getting on with it, Jupiter moving in to Capricorn. So Capricorn, beginning with you, like I was saying, so much going on in your sign this last while, and it's not over yet. And we're really looking, to your energy, to the higher vibration of your energy to show us what authentic leadership looks like, right? In this day and age, in this new world, in a sense, that we're moving towards. So Capricorn, with Jupiter moving into your sign and into your first house of self, this is bringing you some optimism, some abundance, some growth, some expansion, some truth, some wisdom regarding, yourself, who you are out in the world, your relationship to the world around you, who you present yourself to be, your physical body, right? And vitality. So this actually can be a time, something just to be mindful of, where literally Jupiter moving into the first house can have you physically growing, right? So something to be mindful of there. But it wants you to grow your sense of self ultimately, right? That's the big takeaway here, I would say. So it's a real time to discover who you really are and who you wish to be, and to embrace that, with joy, but in your mature, responsible, masterful Capricornian way. So that's for you, Cap. I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to move on to Sagittarius now, where we have Jupiter entering your second house. So Sag, Jupiter in the second can bring you some opportunity and luck and growth and expansion in your self-worth, in your, material possessions, your money, the money you make from the skills and talents that you have, your sense of security in the physical world, your values. So all of these things are what Jupiter is focusing on for you over the next year. And, bringing this air of optimism and enthusiasm and joy ultimately. And the only thing I would say, on the shadow side to be mindful of is things like, going over the top, because Jupiter can have that impact, right? So overspending, for example. When it comes to your personal values, then I would say, if we're looking at the shadow side, I'd be mindful of considering that what's true for you is not necessarily what's true for everybody else. So that might be something to think about. But generally, this is a really optimistic transit, I would say. Again, keeping in mind it's in Capricorn. So there is some requirement here to be mature and responsible and masterful in our approach to these second house themes that I spoke about. So that's for you, Sag. Next, we have Scorpio, where Jupiter is moving into your third house. So Scorpio, for you, this is about abundance, luck, growth, optimism, expansion in relation to your immediate environment and your communications. So how you communicate, your style of communication, messages exchanged back and forth, the people in your immediate environment. So the people that you communicate with on the day-to-day, cousins, siblings, neighbors, peers, workmates, this kind of thing. And how you kind of get your message out, like the details of how you get your message out, whether that be speaking, writing, the mode of communication. This all, and this can have to do with like short jaunts, like short distance travel too, commuting, that kind of thing. So that third house area is where Jupiter's coming in to grow things for you, ultimately in and optimally in an abundant, joyful way. What you need to be mindful of, I would say, is overdoing it in this department, right? So being mindful of not pushing your agenda via communications on others, and understanding that people have, I just said this to Sagittarius in a different, speaking to the second house, but people have different notions of the truth, right? And so what's true for you may not be true for others. So there may be some something that you have to consider in that vein. So ultimately, Jupiter in the third house, right? Growth and expansion in those third house themes, but done in a Capricornian way, mature, responsible, masterful kind of thing. So that's for you, Scorpio. Moving on to Libra, where we have Jupiter moving through your fourth house of home, family, your roots, your ancestry, your tribe, the people you consider family, your place of living. And so Jupiter moving through this house can cause growth, expansion, optimism, joy, abundance in this area of life, which is really a beautiful thing. So you may quite literally, have expansion on the home front, like move into a bigger house. Oh my goodness. I think I just heard thunder in the midst of this crazy snowstorm. Neptune. Wow. um, so Libra, that growth and expansion, it can come, maybe new family members coming in. It could be looking at that area of life in a more optimistic way, perhaps. Um, and maybe, word of caution, because I'm sort of doing that for every sign, might be that, don't overdo it. Like, don't, what's an example? So, say you want to buy a new house. Maybe think about not overcommitting to a massive mortgage that you can't really afford, right? Because you're so excited about it. That kind of thing could, has the potential to happen with Jupiter moving through the fourth. But this growth and expansion that's happening here is the best way for you to manage this is using the energy of Capricorn: maturity, responsibility, mastery in those fourth house themes. So that's for you, Libra. Moving on to Virgo now, where we've got Jupiter moving into your fifth house, right? So the house of children, of your inner child, of what sparks joy for you, your creative self expression. And so, Virgo, with Jupiter moving in here, this can be quite lovely, um, bringing luck and optimism and growth and abundance to this area, right? Those life themes. Um, so be mindful of not kind of overcommitting, let's say, in terms of creative projects, not biting off more than you could chew. That would be one example. But ultimately, approach this area with a sense of responsibility and maturity, right? And an eye to mastering this area of your life, right? In true Capricorn fashion. And you have the opportunity here, Virgo, over this next year to grow something really solid, um, you know, that can sustain you for a long time. And really in put down some roots, but also, that tree I mentioned at the beginning, to grow this beautiful, fruitful tree in this fifth house area for you. So hopefully that makes sense for you, Virgo. I'm going to move on to Leo now, where we have Jupiter about to move into your sixth house of your daily grind and, how you are of service in the world, whether it be paid or unpaid, of your health and wellness routines, this kind of thing. And so for you, Jupiter moving through this area of your chart brings an element of luck to your daily affairs, right? Um, and abundance and growth. So it may be that you're going to get a lot more busy on the day to day, Leo, but you may have a sense of ease that you haven't experienced in a while in this area, even though you're busy. And what I would be mindful of in your case is making sure to not bite off more than you can chew, right, on the day to day in relation to those sixth house themes, and to manage that growth in that sixth house area, that abundance, that search for meaning, right, in your day to day with responsibility and maturity, as a Capricorn would, because this is moving through. Sixth house is Capricorn for you in your chart. So that's for you, Leo. I'm going to move on to Cancer now, where we have Jupiter transiting your seventh house over this next year, right? The seventh house is where Capricorn sits for you, Cancer, and that is the house of one-to-one relationships, of significant partnerships in your life. And so Jupiter's bringing this luck and optimism and abundance and growth and seeking adventure and search for meaning into your one-to-one relationships. And so that can be a really beautiful thing. And it can be a breath of fresh air over this next year for you. And be mindful of maybe an impulse to kind of go over the top, right? That's Jupiter in this area of your life. Too fast, too soon, maybe that kind of thing, right? Um, but ultimately, I think this is quite a positive thing for you. What you want to do, Cancer, is to approach that seventh house, those seventh house themes with responsibility and maturity, as Capricorn would do. So that's for you, Cancer. Moving on to Gemini now, where we have Jupiter transiting your eighth house. So beginning December 2nd for about a year, Jupiter will be moving through your eighth house, Gemini. And so this brings you some optimism, some luck, some expansion, some abundance, some search for meaning, perhaps some adventure to the life themes of other people's resources, right? Taxes, insurance, payments, inheritance, bursaries, loans, this kind of thing, business earnings. Also, your intimate relationships, right? Your intimate connections with others, how you are vulnerable with other people, and those things that are buried deep in the psyche, right? That are in need of some healing, perhaps. So, Jupiter moving in here can be a lightness in this area of life that you haven't experienced in a while. Um, just be mindful of Jupiter's tendency to go over the top sometimes. So you want to be thinking about that if you're going, to the bank for a loan or something like that, and not biting off more than you can chew in that department. So anything that you're approaching in this eighth house area, you want to do so with maturity, with responsibility, with a sense of mastery, right? Mastering this eighth house area over the next year is something that would be a good thing to focus on for you, Gemini. And that's because that's where Capricorn sits. So that's for you, Gemini. Moving on to Taurus now, where we have Jupiter moving into your ninth house. And Jupiter is at home in the ninth house. So this is about higher learning and getting your message out to a wider audience. It is about your belief system and worldview, um, your spiritual leanings. And it's about foreign cultures and travel. So there's a hit of optimism and abundance and joy being injected into that area of your chart, Taurus, which is beautiful. Be mindful of not overdoing it, right? Not biting off more than you can chew in this department. Approach these life themes with maturity and with responsibility and with a sense of wanting to master this area of your life over the next year, because that's where Capricorn sits for you, Taurus. So that's for you, Taurus. Moving on to Aries now, where we have Jupiter moving through your 10th house over the next year. So, Aries, the 10th house of our worldly ambitions and our higher calling and our vocation and our career and our sense of authority and our relationship to authority figures. Um, our public persona and status, these kinds of things, the legacy we wish to leave. Jupiter moving in there brings this hit of optimism that you may have not experienced in a while, of luck, of abundance, of growth and expansion. Be mindful to not overdo it, right? To not bite off more than you can chew in this area over the next year, but rather to approach it with Capricornian determination and maturity and responsibility. So that's for you, Aries. Moving on to Pisces now, where we've got Jupiter about to transit your 11th house for the next year, which is the house of our friendship groups and networks and the people that are walking the same path as us. It's the house of our hopes and vision for the future and the people that can help us reach that. And so Jupiter moving into that house is an opportunity to expand and grow and experience some abundance in this 11th house area for you, Pisces. And it can be really optimistic and feel joyful. Be mindful to not go over the top and bite off more than you can chew in this area. Ultimately, if you approach it with the Capricorn, in the Capricorn way of being masterful and and responsible and mature and determined, then this can grow something really beautiful and sustainable in that area of life for you over the next year. So that's for you, Pisces. Last but not least, we have Aquarius, where we've got Jupiter moving into your 12th house, Aquarius. And this is the house of the unseen, the subconscious, our dreams, our connection to the other worlds kind of thing. It can have to do with our self-sabotaging behaviors, those things buried in our unconscious, right? And so what happens behind closed doors and solitude and that sort of thing. There is an element of luck coming to you, and optimism and growth and expansion, perhaps opportunity for a big spiritual awakening, Aquarius. That would be one way this may potentially play out for you. Be mindful not to overdo it. So I would say, what you don't want to expand are your self-sabotaging behaviors. That's not where you want to put the focus here. You want to approach these 12th house themes in a Capricorn way, right? With a sense of mastery and responsibility and maturity and determination. And that's what will reap the rewards by the end of this transit for you, Aquarius. So that's all 12 signs. I hope you found that helpful. And I'll be back to speak to you next Wednesday, okay? Take good care. In the meantime, hit my website, check out the other social media platforms for more often communication. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.